Hi, Reshma. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us virtually today. So welcome, Reshma. Saujani, thank you so much for everything that you do. You're a leading activist and the founder of Girls Who Code and the Marshall Plan for Moms. You spent more than a decade building movements to fight for women and girls' economic empowerment, working to close the gender gap in the tech sector. I mean, is there anything you can't do? And I know you're also a busy working mom. So could you talk a little bit about what led you or inspired you maybe to focus on building this new movement for women's equality, advocating for policies to support moms impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 has crushed working women. In the course of the pandemic, almost 12 million women have been pushed out of the labor force. Today there's still 1.1 million women missing. One out of three women are talking about quitting their jobs because childcare is too expensive. 51% of working women say that they're anxious and depressed. And so women are in crisis. But at the same time, we have like a once in a lifetime opportunity to fundamentally transform our workplaces. I started COVID-19 in January of 2020 with Girls Who Code having a Super Bowl ad. I was on top of the world. I was having a newborn baby, and I was looking so forward to taking my leave and spending time with my newborn son. And then COVID-19 hit, and I had to go back to work when he was 3 weeks old. When pandemics hit, the first organizations to be hit are our organizations of women and girls.
Mhm.
Most of my leadership team had young children, and we were just barely making it every day. And then we all thought that when the schools opened, that everything will be okay. And when the schools didn't open, and you started seeing millions of women being pushed out of the workforce because they didn't have affordable childcare, they didn't have the resources that they need. Daycare centers were shut down. Grandparents couldn't come in and take care of children, and that women were basically replacing, their unpaid labor for their paid labor.
Mhm.
You saw a crisis. And I kept thinking, well, where's the plan? You
Mhm.
can't lose this many women from the labor force without a plan. And that's what really inspired me to start building the Marshall Plan for Moms and to write my new book, Pay Up, which is coming out
Mhm.
in a couple of weeks.
Yes, I'm so excited. May 15th, March 15th, rather. I have it on pre-order. I'm super excited.
Wonderful.
Let's talk a little bit about actually the sort of the nuts and bolts of the Marshall Plan for Moms. How does this impact women of color? I love how you center, I love how we both center women of color in our work. And how does this fit into the larger movement for women's equality?
Yeah, well, when I talked to moms at my PTA and I said, well, what do you need to go back to work? The first thing that women say is, I need cash.
Mm,
70% of Black women in our country are the single breadwinners, what I mean, and the single caretakers, and so when they lose their job, the entire family suffers.
mhm,
And we know globally that when you put cash in the hands of mothers, it will
mhm,
be put to work, whether it's to pay for shoes or get a tutor or get them the support they need. Secondly, we need paid leave. The United States is the only industrialized nation that doesn't have paid leave. Papua New Guinea is doing better than we are. And
yes.
so when your kids are sick or when your kids are quarantined and schools are shut down and you don't have paid sick days, you lose your job.
Mhm,
Third thing, affordable childcare. Most people spend more on childcare than they do on their mortgage payments.
yeah.
My parents were refugees and my mom couldn't afford the $50 a week for childcare. So I was a latchkey kid from the time I was 7 years old.
Mm,
Too many parents are having to make unconscionable choices,
mm,
because childcare is too expensive. And finally, a lot more women's jobs were automated during COVID-19, especially women of color, than men. And so women in retail and healthcare, education, those jobs aren't coming back.
mm.
And so we need those women to be able to have good paying jobs so they can put food on the table for themselves and their children. And so what's the plan to actually retrain them?
Yeah, you're so right. I remember telling a friend in the UK, I mean, I was born outside this country and have spent most of my life outside of it as well. And I remember telling a friend in the UK, well, the United States doesn't have paid, even maternity leave, yet caregiver leave mandated. And she was like, isn't that a human rights abuse issue here? And I said, yeah, it is, but people aren't talking about it nearly enough. And it's amazing and inspiring to see you centering the reality of what that looks like, right? And it's an issue where it's like, oh, it's a women's issue here on the side. We don't need to talk about it. I love how you make it a policy issue, because it is. It's a human societal issue, right?
For so long, we've basically said, well, it's your choice. When
Correct.
you become a mom, it's your choice. So you don't get nice things. You don't get paid leave. You don't get support from the government or your employer or your partner.
Yeah.
You deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, and truly, and women across the sort of socioeconomic spectrum, which is something that's really, again, surprising here to me as a, and as an immigrant and an outsider and a working mom. I'm like, why? Like it literally, it's an individual issue that we've put it on people that way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's kind of what I talk about my book, Pay Up. It's about, the lie of corporate feminism. That it's the woman and not the system. Well, it's the system and not the woman. And so many of us, especially, my book talks a little bit about the history of workplaces. We were essentially taught that if you leaned in, you could girl boss your way to the top. And there was just an express train to the corner office. And if you couldn't get on it, that's your problem. And, feminism never addressed the inequality that was happening at home. And the vast majority of women were doing 2.5 jobs. And the answer wasn't as simple as color coding your calendar or getting a mentor or a sponsor. It wasn't your fault. And so when many of us were drowning, we thought it was us, our problem. We couldn't take it. And so we have never been taught, that there are structures that need to be put into place that provide you the support that you need to get to equality in the workplace. And that's the different conversation that we need to have today. Like, you can't waste a good crisis, and we can't go back to that broken system. And listen, the forces are in place to tell you, well, just, nothing was broken. Well, everything was broken about workplaces.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, we're speaking the same language, truly. So let's talk a little bit about some of the distinct policy initiatives you're advocating for. Obviously, paid family leave, affordable childcare. To talk about the legislation introduced in the House by Congresswoman Grace Meng and in the Senate by Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Tammy Duckworth. Could you talk a little bit about that, some of the specifics, and also, I know this is a whole other question, but what do you mean by the motherhood penalty when you kind of center that in your work?
Yeah, so the Marshall Plan for Moms, legislation has been introduced in Congress and in a handful of states, and basically what we're asking for is to center moms in the economic recovery, and so that could be in the form of a task force, right, where you're basically looking at all the jobs that have been lost of women leaving the workforce, and then what are the levers that we're pulling to get women back in. So when you look at the job numbers now, the reason why mothers are not re-entering the workforce is because childcare is unavailable and unaffordable. Solving childcare and making it affordable is a key measure, or lever that we have to pull if we're ever going to get women back to work. And we need to remember, Ruchika, that when we talk about 1.1 million women that are missing from the workforce, that doesn't account for all the women who have downshifted, who have changed their jobs, who have basically made radical changes. And we got to remember that when we started COVID-19, we were 51% of the labor force.
Yeah.
We were popping the champagne, right? We were there. So we need to have, like I say, a women's job czar in every single, everywhere, in every city, in every state, in every country, essentially measuring what women's economic representation is back in. The motherhood penalty. So, we spent a lot of time and in my book, Pay Up, I really did a lot of research and I learned about this. The pay gap exists not between men and women,
right?
Mothers and fathers.
Mothers, yes.
When you become a mother, suddenly you're seen as less committed to your job. You leave the workplace when you have a baby for 1 year, you lose 40% of your salary. 40%. And so the pay gap is because we're still trying to make up for that. In fact, childless women make more than mothers. And if we solve the motherhood penalty, if we rooted out the motherhood penalty, we would close the pay gap.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about it that way, right? The vast majority of people, when I say this, they're like, really? I didn't know that. So it's like we're on this hamster wheel of trying to solve, the pay gap, when really we have to just get rid of discrimination against mothers. Like, that's the problem that we have to solve.
Yeah. And then there's the fatherhood bonus, which is
Let's get rid of that too.
infuriating, right? Which is like, oh, you're a father. Suddenly you're going to be so much more dedicated, to the workplace, and you're going to be so much better a leader. And let's pay you more, as the research shows. All right. Okay. All right. Whew. All right. You have some amazing campaigns going on. I love them. Right. So, can we talk a little bit about, the bipartisan poll, the new playbook for employers? Your moms deserve more than flowers, dear President Biden. I mean, pick one or pick all. They're all amazing.
Well, we started off basically this campaign with a full page ad to President Biden in the New York Times because it was his first 100 days, basically saying that moms don't work for free.
Mhm.
And it was signed by, from Amy Schumer to Gabrielle Union to Mindy Grossman to Ai Poo. So activists, CEOs, Jen Hyman, leaders, basically saying, let's finally, essentially provide recovery for mothers because we are drowning. And that really ignited this massive movement because, again, like I think so many moms are like, oh my God, I feel seen.
Mhm.
Like this isn't me. Something is that's happening to me that is not right. This expectation without support is not right. And we followed that up with a handful of different campaigns. We did a Mother's Day, we did a whole flower store, really educating people about the unpaid labor.
Mhm.
You know, mothers work 2.5 jobs. We lost $800 billion of unpaid, essentially if we had put a cost estimate on that, that would have been the cost of the unpaid labor that we did, over the course of the pandemic. And so really recognizing that the work that women do at home
Mhm.
is work
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
needs to be valued, and
Yeah.
igniting that conversation
Mm.
in our country is really critical. And the campaign that we're doing right now is really my book, Pay Up, which is about, look, we're in a moment, Ruchika, where it's unclear whether Build Back Better is going to pass. It's
Yeah.
unclear whether we're going to get paid leave or affordable childcare,
Mm.
or the child tax credit, which has already expired. And we
Mm.
can't leave moms out there. We have already demonstrated that we're much more comfortable bailing out airplanes
Mm.
than bailing out moms. And I, for one, refuse to just do nothing. And,
Mm.
basically waiting for the government is a losing strategy. And so Pay Up is about igniting a movement in
Yeah.
workplaces.
Mhm.
If government's not going to provide childcare, the
Yeah.
private sector should. If the
Yeah.
government's not going to provide paid leave, the private sector should. I
Yes.
mean, we have leverage in the middle of the great resignation and in the talent wars to tell you
Mhm.
what we need. And we are not coming back to work unless we provide these benefits. And bonus, it makes sense for the private sector
Yeah.
to
Yes.
provide these benefits right now because there's a race to the bottom in terms of just salary inflation.
Yeah. You're so right. What I think is also really inspiring about the work you do, and even why I'm so excited about Pay Up, is because what I find is when the private sector takes sort of ownership of this, there's real chance to innovate, right? And we look at innovative companies that are like, okay, we're not just going to talk about paid maternity leave. We're going to talk about fertility, about money for fertility treatments, for other caregiver leave, we know that it's not just a mother's issue, and we know that only offering paid maternity leave actually exacerbates the inequality at home. So let's look at fatherhood leave, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that there's such an opportunity here, and I'm just so excited that you're doing this, and leading this. It's awesome.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that because there's a cultural shift that needs to happen.
You're right.
And in many ways, companies can lead the way. And that doesn't mean that government doesn't have to follow, because it does.
Mm-hmm.
I think this whole idea that essentially motherhood is your personal problem,
Yeah.
childcare is your personal problem, that it's not an economic issue, is
Hmm.
to change. It is an economic issue.
It's, you're so right. You're so right. And speaking of sort of some of the ways that, the reason, I think at the core of a lot of us in this work will say is part of it is that we think it's an individual issue. The other part is we think it's only a women's issue, right? And you have really worked on reframing this. Why are male allies such a vital part of this movement? And could you tell us a little bit about the coalition, founding supporters, and allies?
Yeah, I mean, men are critical. We had 50 men from Steph Curry, to Adam Grant, right? To, I have supporters like John Legend, who's blurbed my book, like who are like, yes, you know, we as men need to do more, but we also can't continue to have mothers be our social, safety net. A lot
Mhm.
of these men had strong moms that raised them, and they saw the sacrifices. They saw how our society sets them up to fail, and that something has to change, especially for women of color. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? In low income women, like it's got to change, and we have an opportunity, to change it right now. Look, at Girls Who Code, 40% of our Girls Who Code teachers were men. I had half my board are men. These are, partners, dads who are saying, you know what, I want it different for my daughters,
Mhm.
and who stand side to side. Jack Dorsey has supported John Legend. Both of them are like, brothers in arms to me, supported every movement I've ever built, even sometimes when it's just an idea in my head.
Yeah.
And so I think that we men are critical. My first three funders for the Marshall Plan for Moms, biggest
Mhm.
funders were men. Craig
Mhm.
Newmark, you know what I mean? Brian O'Kelly. So men are critical, you know what I mean, to this movement, to this moment. And they get it.
Yeah.
And they want it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, inequality helps. It hurts everyone, and solving inequality will help everyone, right? And that also helps us take it out of that narrative of it's a women's issue, it's a girl's issue, all of that.
But I think the key, Ruchika, because when I first launched this Marshall Plan for Moms, people said to me, "Well, what about the dads?" And I was like, "Well, what about the dads?"
Mm-hmm.
Job 20 this past jobs report again, 27 times more men entered the workforce. COVID has not rocked men's economic potential in the way that it has rocked women's.
Yes.
And so, just like Girls Who Code, I called it Girls Who Code, not Kids Who Code, because there was a gender
Yes.
issue intact. So it's about focus, not exclusion.
Mm.
If we just say we want, a gender neutral policy, but we're still affecting, we talk about parents instead of mothers when it's really mothers who are doing the caretaking, then we don't solve the problem.
Yeah.
So we have to be okay about naming it,
Yeah.
and then about getting to the world that we want to be in, which is gender neutral. But we have to acknowledge we're not there yet.
Nope, not at all. I mean,
But we're
any
close.
parent will go and, you want to buy clothes for your kids. There's no way it's gender neutral. We're not there yet. Those colors, they're not gender neutral. So I love that you are naming that. And I think it's brave because I know in the social media world where sometimes we lack nuance, people can get really fixated on things and then distract from the bigger issue, which is, you're right, it is a gender issue today. Let's talk about pay up in a little more detail. What are the practical tools you lay out for women? And then let's talk a little bit about the tools for business leaders. But let's start with the practical tools for women.
Yes, I mean, I think it's about what do we want our workplaces to look like? How do we
Mm.
transform them? And so, like, I want a workplace where my employers, I don't have to hide my motherhood. I can move in and out of the workforce without penalty.
Mhm.
My mental health is valued just as much as my output.
Mhm.
And we have an opportunity, I think, to build that workplace. And so I talk about 9 things in the book that employers can do. And I'll just quickly do 3 of them. The first thing is really subsidizing childcare. As we said, the reason why women have not re-entered the workforce is because childcare is unaffordable, and unavailable. If we want to get the most talented women back to work, subsidize some form of childcare. In fact,
Yeah.
it's cheaper to subsidize childcare than the attrition rate that most companies are facing right now. Secondly, we've got to incentivize more men to take paid leave. It's not good enough to just offer paid leave and then gaslight men when you offer it, when they take it, sorry. And more men, they want to take it. They want to take
Mhm.
care of their kids. It's good for our society. It's
Yeah.
good for their health. So let's incentivize them to do
Mm.
that. And the third thing is like, as we re-enter the workforce or whatever that looks like, we have to acknowledge that moms are broken. We're exhausted. We're
We are.
traumatized. Our kids are traumatized. So just don't pretend like nothing's happened to us.
Mm.
It has. And so focusing on women's and mothers and working women's mental health in this moment is critical. It's interesting, Ruchika, the CDC just released a report that the two subgroups that are facing the most amount of anxiety and depression are 18 to 24-year-olds
Mhm.
and mothers. Thinking about it, and it's almost like for the same reasons, because we're saying to our young people, go change the world, go solve COVID, cancer, and climate, right? And let's pretend that you haven't been traumatized by the past 2 years. Just go. And we're saying the same thing to mothers, right? It's like, let's not forget that you basically had to, decimate your careers, your lives, your mental health to save your families in our country, and just forget about it. Go back to work 5 days a week. Thank you.
Yeah. And come back to the office without me even thinking about that.
Right. And so, Reshma, we think like, wait, are we crazy? Like, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. You've gone through something. You've experienced something. And it is not up to you. Don't, you know what I mean? Don't fix the woman, fix the system.
Yes, absolutely. As you said that, like, you're not crazy, like literally my shoulders dropped, because for so much of the last 2 years I did, and I saw the physical manifestations on my body. Like, this is a crisis. This is a war, right? And we're talking about wars in the news. This was a war when we're still going through it, and I'm glad that
Absolutely. I'm with you. Like, my liver failed. I got COVID-19. It barely, I had so much physical stuff. All of us did. And and it's like, we almost have to we're almost being asked to pretend that nothing happened to us. And I think that is what is even more traumatizing in this moment.
Yeah, you're so right. I want to switch a little bit to talk about what makes you hopeful about Pay Up. What is the sort of hope with Pay Up? What is, pie in the sky, here we are dreaming? What's the world going to look like after folks read Pay Up and really internalize it?
I think it's taking women from rage to power. For so long, right, we breastfed in the closet. We didn't have to take our kids to the doctor's appointment. We rather quit than ask for Fridays to work from home.
Yes.
And we are in a new moment right now. We have to recognize that if things don't change, there will be another pandemic. There will be another crisis. We will be right back where we are again if we don't change things. I think the second thing is we're power. We got power. We are powerful right now. They need us.
Yes.
Need us. Period. Right? And so we have to take that power and that leverage and to really ask for what we want. And we know what we want: help with our childcare. We want to change the gender ratio at home in terms of work. We want to be respected. We don't have to hide her. I want to see my kids. I want to take them to school. I want to go to ballet class.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss out. You know what I mean? And so I don't want to have to pick between being a mother or having a job. I want both. Men get both.
Yeah, they do.
They do. They get both. I just want what they have.
Yeah. You're so right. And not be penalized for it.
And not be penalized for it. Not be judged. Respect, valued. I mean, like, for me, I'm a CEO. I hire a mom like anytime because I know what I'm going to get. And I want people to see moms and working moms the way we see them.
Yeah, I would love for the conversation to be reframed long term. I remember 6 years ago when I was pregnant, I told people I was on sabbatical. I would rather, and I worked for myself, but I would rather not risk a client being like, oh, maternity leave, like that means she's not going to be able to work with us. So it affects everyone, right? Whether you work within an organization or you're an entrepreneur.
I mean, how many friends do you have that like didn't tell their pregnancy until the last minute? Why? Because
and then have long conversations about, like, they were like role playing with you, like, hey, so like if I wear this and I do it like this and I say it on a Friday afternoon at this time with a full-on plan, do you think that they would? Do you think the manager
we
would
normalize that? Like, we should be ashamed.
Yeah, we should be
that
ashamed.
We actually expect that women will lie to us because we know that we're going to discriminate against them. Like, we should be ashamed.
Yeah, you're so right. Okay. Last question, or maybe sort of second last question. What can folks do to get involved or help apart from Buy Pay Up, which is on sale March 15th, I think? Is that correct?
That's right. Go pre-order that book now.
Please pre-order right now. Super cool, super exciting. Reshma, what else?
I think really think about how you can be an advocate in your workplace and
Mm.
demand change and form a community of allies. I think about this. It's like, again, men are quitting too. And the number one reason why they're quitting is because they want to spend more time with their families. So they
Mhm.
want what we want. Young women, we have the lowest birth rate than we've had in the history of our nation because young women look at us and they say, no, thank you. And I
Mhm.
say to them, you got to be part of this movement too, because don't let them take your choice away from you. You don't have a kid, you choose that. Don't
Yeah.
let them choose that for you. So, we need to build, coalition right
Mm.
now. And, again, I think that like the future of work conversation is very real. It's very present. Hustle culture is dead. And if it's not dead, let's kill it together.
Yep.
And pay up is how we do that.
So it's no more of the sleep when you're dead sort of,
No,
tagline,
no.
right?
No more of that. It doesn't, I built Girls Who Code like that. 2,
Yeah.
3 planes a week, never saw my kids, never slept, never relaxed, never had, never went on vacation, never did anything.
Mm.
Now I'm building Marshall Plan for Moms, which will be a bigger movement than Girls Who Code, but I'm doing it with like 8.5 hours of sleep and
Great.
doing bedtime every day and doing my girls trip and feeling healthy and seeing the world and taking a Bhagavad Gita class and like living with joy and life. And that's how you're innovative and that's how you're creative. You know, Going back, this is not about like we'll be more productive if we work all the time. We're less productive when we do that.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's also, I just want to say how trailblazing it is to hear you talk about that, because a lot of the existing advice for, people on how to be more productive or how to get more done, focuses on what men do, right? Like rich white men who have all the resources. Oh, I read 50 books a week, or I sleep for 12 hours a day. And look at me running this, multi-billion-dollar organization. And I think that there's a lot of shame in that, and having you talk
Yeah.
about what brings you joy. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ruchika, I think it's like I was having this conversation earlier. I think that we have the opportunity to build what the new model of women's leadership look like.
You're so
It's
right.
funny. It's like in the middle of like Women's History Month right now. What is everyone like? Everyone's having these bringing these speakers and like this is how you color code your calendar and this is how you get a mentor. No, you should be doing sessions on like how to do laundry. You know what I mean? How to basically get more gender equality in your home. Like put all the men through that session. We
Yes,
have to be having a radically different conversation. We
you're so
can't go back to the old model. Now, I'm not saying like I think I have some ideas in pay up of what that new model looks like, but we have an opportunity to reset that, you know. And I think it is a model where we value our family values or our caretaking values, whether you want to spend time caring for your pet, your elderly parents, or your kids, or your life, you know what I mean, or yourself. But we have to have a different model of what young women, when they look up to us, are seeing.
You're so right. Well, listen, you are such a trailblazer. You have inspired so many, including myself. I am so proud of you, and I'm so excited for your book, Pay Up, folks, which comes out on March 15th, available for pre-order now. Congratulations on all you're doing and building, not just for you, but really for all of us. And literally, whoever we are, I think we'll all benefit from the work that you're doing and that you've been leading. So thank you so much, Reshma
Thank
Saujani.
you, Ruchika. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks all. Take care. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.